Imagine it's late at night. Maybe you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, or watching this while sipping your evening tea. Or perhaps it's early morning where you are, the sun just rising outside your window. Wherever you're watching from, whether it's London, New York, or Paris, get ready to travel back in time to an age of silk gowns, diamond crowns, and absolutely horrifying hygiene. Because behind all the royal glamour and golden thrones, there were secrets. Filthy, smelly, and downright disgusting secrets that royal women tried desperately to hide. We often think of queens and princesses as perfect, elegant, graceful, and clean. But history tells a very different story. Long before perfume, toothpaste, and daily baths became normal, the royal courts of Europe were filled with stench, disease, and habits that would make your stomach turn. From never bathing for months, to using poisonous makeup, to hiding rotten teeth behind jeweled smiles. These were the dark realities of royal beauty. So as you watch this, maybe from the comfort of your own clean room, remember this. Even the most powerful women in history weren't immune to the limits of their time. Their beauty came at a price. Their elegance was often an illusion. And their royal secrets were much dirtier than you could ever imagine. Now, let us uncover the 6 most disgusting hygiene habits royal women tried to hide. And trust me, number 6 will make you grateful for your toothbrush. In a time when soap was scarce, baths were rare, and plumbing was almost non-existent, royal women had to find clever and often extreme ways to hide the odors that came with unwashed bodies. Perfume was not just a luxury in those days. It was a survival tool. The elegant queens and duchesses of Europe, whose portraits we still admire today, lived in palaces that smelled far from pleasant. Behind the dazzling gowns, glittering jewels, and powdered wigs was an invisible cloud of heavy, sweet perfume, their secret weapon against the stink of their own world. The habit of masking body odor with fragrance began long before the Renaissance. Ancient Egyptians and Romans already understood the art of scent, using oils and herbs to appear clean and godlike. But in medieval and early modern Europe, perfume became a necessity. As bathing declined due to fears of disease and the lack of proper sanitation, people, even the most powerful, began to rely on perfume to disguise the smell of sweat, dirt, and decay. Royal women, who were constantly in public and expected to represent perfection, mastered this art to near perfection. One of the earliest examples was Queen Elizabeth I of England. She was known for her obsession with cleanliness in appearance, but not necessarily in practice. Since she bathed only once a month, she made up for it by surrounding herself with sweet smells. Her servants burned scented herbs in her chambers, her clothes were stored with lavender and rose petals, and she used perfumed gloves that left a trace of fragrance wherever she went. When she walked through her court, the air was thick with scent, a deliberate illusion of freshness. To her courtiers, she smelled divine. But in truth, the perfume was masking weeks of unwashed reality. By the 17th and 18th centuries, France had become the center of perfume culture. The French court, especially under Louis XIV and later Louis XV, was famous for its love of luxury and scent. Versailles, for all its beauty, was infamous for its terrible hygiene. There were no proper toilets, and the palace was filled with the smell of sweat, rotting food, and waste. To survive in such conditions, perfume became a weapon. The king himself was called le roi perfume, the perfumed king, because of the enormous amounts of fragrance used at court. His mistresses and courtiers, including the royal women, followed the same routine. The women of Versailles did not just wear perfume, they lived in it. They sprinkled rose water in their wigs, dabbed jasmine oil behind their ears, and even perfumed their fans and gloves. Some went further, perfuming their undergarments and petticoats so that every movement released a cloud of scent. The royal perfumer, a highly respected figure, was as important as a doctor or tailor. Every morning, noblewomen would select a fragrance that matched their mood or outfit, as if it were part of their identity. To smell good was to appear civilized, elegant, and powerful. Marie Antoinette, perhaps the most famous queen of France, was obsessed with perfume. She had her own perfumer, Jean-Louis Fargin, who created custom scents for her. She preferred delicate floral notes, roses, violets, orange blossoms, and would have her bed linens and gloves scented to match. Her perfume was not just a personal pleasure, it was a political statement. In the artificial world of Versailles, where every gesture and glance was judged, Smelling exquisite was part of maintaining a royal image. Yet, beneath all that glamour, she too lived in a world where people rarely bathed. Perfume was her shield against the unpleasant reality of palace life. In those centuries, perfume was not used the way we use it today. It was much stronger, often made with animal fats, musk, ambergris, or even whale secretion to make the scent last longer. The result was a thick, heavy aroma that could fill an entire room. Noblewomen used it to cover not just body odor, but also the smell of their wigs, which were often full of lice and powder, and their dresses, which absorbed smoke and sweat from crowded gatherings. Perfume became their invisible armor, protecting their social reputation as much as their senses. Even personal hygiene products were perfumed. Since water was considered dangerous, royal women cleaned their skin with scented cloths soaked in alcohol and flower oils. Instead of soap, they used powders made of ground iris roots, violet petals, or even crushed pearls. These were rubbed onto the skin to absorb oil and smell pleasant. But beneath those layers of fragrance, the body remained unwashed. It was all surface beauty, a carefully maintained illusion of cleanliness. Perfume also became a social signal. The richer and more powerful a woman was, the more expensive and exotic her perfume would be. Scents imported from the Middle East, India, or the Caribbean, such as sandalwood, amber, or vanilla, were signs of wealth and status. To smell like these rare ingredients was to announce that you were part of the elite. The poor, of course, could not afford perfume and smelled of labor and the streets. So in a strange way, smell itself became a class marker. To be fragrant was to be noble, but this obsession had its dark side. Many perfumes were made with toxic ingredients. Lead and mercury were used in scented cosmetics, and heavy animal fats trapped dirt and bacteria on the skin. Some royal women developed rashes and breathing issues from constant exposure to these chemical mixtures. Yet they had no choice. Smelling unpleasant was unthinkable. Outside France, other royal courts followed the same trend. In Spain, Queen Isabella was said to have worn perfume made from orange blossoms and musk. In Russia, Catherine the Great's palace was filled with the scent of amber and lilacs. In Austria, Empress Maria Theresa ordered that her rooms be sprinkled with rose water every morning. Each queen built her own scented world, trying to transform filth into beauty through fragrance. It's important to understand that these women were not just being vain. They were living in a time when science had not yet linked hygiene with health. Smell was believed to protect against disease. Physicians claimed that pleasant odors could purify the air and keep away the miasmas, the invisible vapors thought to cause plague and fever. So royal women wore perfume not only to smell good but also to feel safe. By the 19th century, when medical science finally proved the importance of washing, the role of perfume began to change. It became more of a fashion accessory than a necessity. But for hundreds of years before that, perfume was the royal woman's secret shield, a daily ritual that kept up the illusion of purity, beauty, and control. Imagine a ballroom in Versailles or London during the 1700s, the flicker of candles, the shimmer of silk, the air thick with music and scent. Each woman in that room, smiling gracefully behind her fan, carried with her layers of unwashed skin covered in oils and flowers. The perfume was not just decoration. It was deception, a beautiful disguise that hid the truth about royal hygiene. So when we think of the elegance of the past, of Marie Antoinette's powdered beauty, Elizabeth's regal presence, or the dazzling courtiers of Versailles, we must remember what was hidden behind that perfume. It wasn't just the scent of roses and jasmine. It was the smell of a world trying to mask its own decay. And for royal women, the art of fragrance wasn't simply vanity, it was survival. In the glittering courts of early modern Europe, sugar was more valuable than gold. It was the luxury that only the elite could afford, a shimmering white treasure imported from distant colonies. But this sweet indulgence carried a dark secret. For royal women, sugar became both a symbol of power and a source of pain. It destroyed their teeth, yet somehow turned into a mark of beauty and privilege. The story of how rotten teeth became fashionable among the royals is one of the strangest and most ironic chapters in history. In the 16th and 17th centuries, sugar was not a common household item. It was rare, expensive, and imported from places like the Caribbean and Brazil through the brutal labor of enslaved people. A small lump of sugar was enough to impress guests, and the ability to serve sweet pastries or candied fruits was a sign of extreme wealth. For royal women, who lived their entire lives under the gaze of courtiers and diplomats, consuming sugar wasn't just a treat, it was a performance of status. Every spoonful of sweet syrup, every bite of glazed fruit whispered one message: I am rich, I am royal, and I can afford what you cannot. But the body doesn't care about social status. The same sugar that sparkled on golden platters soon began to eat away at the royal teeth. In a time before toothpaste or dental care, even the most powerful queens could not escape tooth decay. Their enamel broke down, their gums blackened, and their mouths filled with pain. Yet rather than admit weakness or change their habits, these women turned the decay itself into a symbol of fashion. Queen Elizabeth I of England was one of the earliest and most famous examples. By the end of her reign, her teeth were so decayed that her speech was affected. Foreign ambassadors wrote in their reports that the Queen's blackened teeth were visible when she smiled. But Elizabeth was powerful, untouchable, and admired by all. Her appearance set the trend for the entire court. Noblewomen who wished to imitate her would darken their own teeth with soot or cosmetics, pretending that they too indulged in the luxury of sugar. Incredibly, rotten teeth became a status symbol. The idea spread across Europe. To have black or decayed teeth was no longer shameful. It was proof that one had access to rare and expensive goods. For the poor, who could not afford sugar, white teeth became associated with poverty. So in a world turned upside down, dental decay became fashionable among the upper class. Beauty, once defined by purity and perfection, now carried the stain of indulgence and excess. Royal women often tried to disguise their dental problems in creative ways. They chewed on cloves and mint leaves to mask the smell of decay. Some used honey mixed with crushed pearls or coral powder to clean their teeth. Ironically, both substances only made things worse. Others had their portraits painted with their mouths closed, a subtle attempt to hide the damage behind a serene expression. In France, during the reign of Louis XIV, sugar was everywhere. The Sun King's lavish feasts were famous for their desserts, candied fruits, sugared almonds, and elaborate pastries dripping with syrup. His mistresses and court ladies followed suit. They nibbled on sweets all day long, oblivious to the damage it caused. By the time of Louis XV and Marie Antoinette, the obsession with sugar had become an art form. The Queen's favorite chef, Antonin Carême, created entire architectural structures made of sugar. Guests would marvel at the sculptures, castles, fountains, even miniature temples before devouring them piece by piece, but the after-effects were painful. Dentists of the 18th century were few and far between, and their tools were terrifying. Tooth extraction was done without anesthesia, often with pliers or hooks. Many noblewomen endured the agony rather than face the shame of losing their teeth. Some wore false teeth made from animal bone or ivory, but these looked unnatural and were prone to slipping during conversation. Others simply covered their mouths with fans when they spoke or laughed, a gesture that became a mark of refinement and mystery in royal etiquette. Outside of England and France, similar stories unfolded. In Spain, Queen Isabella II was said to have suffered from severe tooth decay caused by her love of chocolate, another sugary luxury. In Russia, Catherine the Great adored candied fruits and sweet liqueurs, and her letters mention the pain of aching gums. In every royal court, the same pattern emerged. Sugar brought prestige, pleasure, and decay in equal measure. The irony of this trend is that what began as a sign of wealth soon became a health crisis. Sugar consumption among the elite skyrocketed, and along with it came dental disease, obesity, and even diabetes-like symptoms. But science was still in its infancy. No one truly understood the link between diet and health. Royal physicians trying to help their patients prescribed bizarre treatments. Some recommended rinsing the mouth with vinegar or urine to strengthen the gums. Others advised rubbing the teeth with crushed coral or even ground brick dust. These treatments only made the situation worse. Despite the pain, sugar remained irresistible. It symbolized everything the royal world loved: indulgence, luxury, and excess. The same sweetness that ruined their teeth sweetened their image in the eyes of the public. When portraits of queens and duchesses circulated across Europe, they often held sugar-related objects: a cup of chocolate, a dish of fruit, a candied rose petal, all subtle reminders of their wealth and sophistication. By the 19th century, sugar had become more common. And dental hygiene had begun to improve thanks to new inventions like the toothbrush and early forms of toothpaste. But the damage done to earlier generations of royals left its mark on history. The blackened smile of Queen Elizabeth I, once seen as fashionable, became a cautionary tale of vanity and excess. Artists began to idealize purity and whiteness again, both in skin and in teeth. The pendulum had swung back. Now clean white teeth were beautiful and decay was ugly once more. Looking back, the story of sugar and royal teeth is more than a tale of bad hygiene. It reveals something deeper about human nature and society. Power and wealth can transform even decay into beauty. When you live in a world where appearances mean everything, even something as painful and unpleasant as rotting teeth can be turned into a symbol of status. Imagine the scene: a royal banquet illuminated by candlelight, gold plates piled high with candied fruits and sweet pastries. The queen raises a cup of spiced wine, smiling graciously, her blackened teeth glinting under the light. The courtiers around her murmur compliments, pretending not to notice the smell of decay. Because in that world, the sweetness of sugar was worth every bit of rot it brought. It was the taste of power, luxury, and excess, and for royal women, it was a price they were willing to pay. In the lavish world of royal courts, where appearances were everything and decorum ruled every gesture, there existed one secret that noblewomen prayed would never be exposed: the reality of how they relieved themselves. Today, we take bathrooms and plumbing for granted, but in the past, even queens and duchesses lived in a world without proper toilets. Beneath layers of silk, lace, and jewels, royal women hid a daily struggle that was as humiliating as it was unsanitary. The truth was that royal life was elegant on the surface, but often filthy just beneath it. For most of history, palaces were not designed with privacy or sanitation in mind. The castles and royal homes of the Middle Ages and Renaissance were built for defense, not comfort. They had grand halls for feasts and ceremonies, but when nature called, things were far less refined. The earliest version of a toilet in such places was the garderobe, a small stone seat built into the wall, often hanging directly over a moat or pit. Waste simply fell down and was washed away by rain or carried off by servants. These primitive facilities were usually shared by several members of the court and were notorious for their smell. For women in heavy gowns and corsets, using them was a nightmare. By the Tudor era, royal women had developed more private, yet still uncomfortable, ways to handle their bodily needs. Queen Elizabeth I of England, for example, reportedly owned a portable close stool. It was a finely crafted wooden chair with a velvet seat and a removable chamber pot hidden underneath. A servant known as the groom of the stool was responsible for maintaining it, cleaning it, emptying it, and even assisting the queen during use if required. Although this sounds shocking, it was considered an honorable position at court because of the proximity to the monarch. But for the queen herself, privacy was an illusion. Even the most intimate moments were witnessed by attendants, since royal women were rarely left alone. Court etiquette made the problem worse. Royal women wore elaborate dresses with layers of petticoats, corsets, and farthingales, hooped skirts. Simply undressing to use the toilet could take half an hour or more. Because of this, women often limited how much they ate or drank during the day. Some even trained themselves to hold it for long periods. During ceremonies, hours could pass without a break, and it would have been considered improper for a queen or duchess to excuse herself. The discomfort must have been unbearable, yet they endured it silently for the sake of dignity. As the centuries progressed, the chamber pot became a permanent fixture in royal life. These pots were made of porcelain, silver, or even gold, beautifully decorated and sometimes perfumed to mask the odor. Ladies-in-waiting carried them discreetly, hidden under skirts or inside furniture like footstools or cabinets. In grand houses, there were close stool rooms, small spaces attached to bedrooms or dressing chambers where women could relieve themselves in private. But private was a relative term. Servants were always nearby, ready to empty and clean the pot afterward. The situation was even worse during social gatherings. Banquets and balls could last for hours, and women's clothing made it impossible to slip away unnoticed. Some historical accounts suggest that noblewomen used special undergarments or open-hooped skirts that allowed them to urinate discreetly into small pots or berteloos, shallow, oval-shaped vessels made of fine porcelain. These were designed specifically for women and could be used while standing or sitting. A lady might excuse herself to a corner of the room or behind a screen, lift her skirt slightly, and use the birdaloo without anyone noticing. The servant would later dispose of the contents. It was considered scandalous if anyone caught her in the act, but it was an open secret that most of them did it. At the Palace of Versailles, the situation was particularly notorious. The palace, despite its magnificence, lacked proper toilets for much of its early history. Visitors often complained about the unbearable smell. Courtiers would relieve themselves in stairwells, behind curtains, or in gardens. The royal women had their own ornate chamber pots. But since hundreds of people lived and worked at the palace, hygiene was nearly impossible to maintain. Servants constantly carried around buckets of scented water, herbs, and vinegar to freshen the air. The queen's apartments might have smelled of roses and lavender, but beneath that perfume lay an unpleasant truth. This lack of sanitation also had serious consequences for health. Waste was often thrown out of windows or emptied into nearby moats, contaminating water sources. Diseases such as dysentery and cholera were common, even among the upper classes. But people of that time didn't understand the link between hygiene and disease. Instead, they blamed bad air or divine punishment. The situation didn't improve until the 18th and 19th centuries, when modern plumbing began to appear. Even then, royal women faced the challenge of balancing propriety with practicality. The first flush toilet was invented in the late 1500s by Sir John Harington, a godson of Queen Elizabeth I, but it wasn't widely adopted until centuries later. When running water and indoor bathrooms finally became common in the 1800s, it revolutionized royal life. Queen Victoria was one of the first monarchs to have flushing toilets installed in her residences. Still, for hundreds of years before her, even queens had lived in conditions that would horrify us today. Imagine the reality of a royal morning routine during the 1600s or 1700s. A noblewoman wakes up surrounded by servants. Her maid helps her out of bed and dresses her in layers of silk and lace. As the morning progresses, she attends audiences, prayers, or breakfast with courtiers. At no point can she excuse herself privately. When she finally feels the urgent need to relieve herself, she signals discreetly to her lady-in-waiting, who brings the chamber pot or birdaloo. The other attendants turn their backs politely, pretending not to notice. The act is quick, quiet, and humiliatingly public. Moments later, she is again the picture of grace, smiling, composed, and elegant. No one would guess what just happened behind the scenes. These hidden moments reveal something profound about royal life. Power and luxury did not guarantee comfort or dignity. Royal women were trapped not only by their political roles, but by the physical constraints of their fashion and etiquette. They lived in a world designed for appearances, not for humanity. Even their most basic needs had to be disguised, managed, or turned into rituals of elegance. In some ways, the chamber pot became a symbol of the contradiction at the heart of royal existence: beauty built on discomfort, refinement masking filth. Every golden pot and perfumed stool was a reminder that, beneath all the grandeur, these women were just as human as anyone else. Today, when we see their portraits hanging in museums, serene faces framed by jewels and lace, it is easy to imagine them as perfect beings untouched by the realities of life. But the truth is much messier. Behind every royal gown was a body bound by corsets, struggling to breathe and to move. Behind every poised smile was a woman silently praying she wouldn't have to use her chamber pot in the middle of a crowded ceremony. That hidden struggle adds a layer of humanity to their stories. It reminds us that even queens had to endure indignities that would make modern people shudder. Their thrones may have been gilded, but their daily reality was anything but glamorous. The next time we imagine a royal ball or a coronation, it's worth remembering that beneath the silks and jewels, the queens of history carried secrets they could never speak. And one of those secrets was just how hard it was to stay elegant in a world without bathrooms. For centuries, pale skin was the ultimate mark of beauty and power. It told the world that you were noble, untouched by the sun, free from the labor that darkened the skin of peasants. In the royal courts of Europe, fair skin was not just admired. It was an obsession. But the lengths to which royal women went to achieve this flawless look were horrifying. Beneath the white glow of their powdered faces lay a slow and silent poison, lead. For generations, queens and aristocrats painted their faces with deadly cosmetics, poisoning themselves in the pursuit of beauty. This toxic secret was one of history's most dangerous beauty rituals. During the 16th and 17th centuries, white skin was considered a symbol of wealth, purity, and moral superiority. A woman's complexion determined her social status. The paler she was, the more noble and refined she appeared. To achieve this ghostly look, women began using cosmetics made from a mixture of white lid and vinegar, known as Venetian ceruse. It went on smooth and gave the skin a porcelain glow that painters and poets compared to marble. The problem was that this beauty came at a terrible cost. Lead is a deadly metal that slowly poisons the body. It seeps through the skin, damages the nerves, and destroys the organs. But in an era when science was limited and fashion ruled everything, no one truly understood how dangerous it was. Queen Elizabeth I of England became one of the most famous users of this deadly makeup. After surviving smallpox, she was left with scars on her face. To hide them, she began applying thicker layers of Venetian ceruse. Over the years, her complexion became unnaturally pale, a look that became known as the mask of youth. Her courtiers admired her beauty and imitated it. But behind that perfect mask, her skin was deteriorating. Lead makeup caused the skin to crack and peel, creating sores and wrinkles. Ironically, the more damage it did, the more makeup she had to apply to cover it up. It was a vicious cycle that trapped her and countless others. Other royal women followed the same deadly trend. In France, noblewomen of the 17th and 18th centuries covered their faces, necks, and even their chests with white paint. They dusted their wigs with powder made from starch and scented it with lavender or orange blossom. The combined result was elegant from afar but terrifying up close. The skin beneath the paint became gray, swollen, and lifeless. Some women's teeth fell out. Their hair thinned. They suffered headaches, stomach pain, and even partial paralysis, all symptoms of lead poisoning. But beauty standards were stronger than fear. A lady without paint was considered unfinished, even indecent. Cosmetics in that time were not regulated. Recipes were passed from one woman to another, from mothers to daughters, with ingredients like mercury, arsenic, vinegar, and chalk. Many believed that a little pain or sickness was a small price to pay for beauty. Physicians and alchemists even endorsed these products, selling their own beauty waters and complexion enhancers. Some claimed their creams could remove freckles or scars. Others promised eternal youth. But in truth, these concoctions were slowly killing the very women who used them. In the royal courts, appearance was everything. Every queen, every duchess was constantly on display. Their faces were symbols of their nation's pride and stability. A beautiful queen reflected a strong kingdom. An aging or blemished one was seen as a sign of weakness. So even when the symptoms of poisoning became visible, pale lips, trembling hands, and rotting skin, many continued using toxic makeup to maintain the illusion. It was not vanity alone that drove them, but survival within a society that demanded perfection. Marie Antoinette, the doomed Queen of France, was also known for her elaborate beauty rituals. She preferred lighter powders and rouge, but even her products often contained harmful substances. The desire to appear eternally youthful and unblemished was deeply ingrained in the royal culture. It wasn't just about attractiveness. It was about control, image, and power. A queen had to look divine, almost untouchable, and for that she would sacrifice her health without hesitation. The use of white lead makeup caused not only physical harm, but also emotional suffering. Many women experienced extreme skin damage that made them hide from others. Some even became reclusive, afraid of being seen without their cosmetic masks. Behind closed doors, they applied ointments made of honey, almond oil, or rose water to soothe their burning skin, not realizing that the root of the problem was still there. In the most tragic cases, lead poisoning led to madness or death. Historical reports describe noblewomen who became delirious, lost their memory, or suffered convulsions before dying, victims of their own beauty rituals. The obsession with pale skin extended beyond makeup. Royal women used parasols and veils to protect themselves from sunlight. They soaked their hands in lemon juice to bleach them and wore gloves even indoors. They slept with slices of raw meat or bread soaked in milk on their faces, believing it would draw out impurities. Everything revolved around the pursuit of an unnatural whiteness. The more fragile and ethereal a woman looked, the more admired she was. As centuries passed, the ideal of beauty slowly began to change. By the early 1800s, doctors and chemists, started to recognize the dangers of lead and mercury. Safer cosmetics made from zinc and natural minerals began to replace the toxic ones. The rise of romanticism in art and literature brought a new appreciation for natural beauty and rosy complexions. Yet, the damage had already been done. Generations of women had suffered and died for an illusion. The illusion that perfection could be painted on the skin. What makes this history so haunting is how it reflects a timeless truth about human nature. The royal women of the past were not foolish or vain. They were trapped in a system that valued appearance over health, reputation over truth. They lived in a world where their worth was measured by the smoothness of their skin and the brightness of their complexion. And even as the poison slowly destroyed them, they smiled through it, maintaining the image of grace and control expected of a queen. Imagine the morning ritual of one of these women. A lady-in-waiting brings a silver tray filled with jars and powders. The queen sits before her mirror, her face pale and tired. Her maid carefully applies layer after layer of white paste, then adds rouge to her cheeks and vermilion to her lips. The reflection that looks back is beautiful, distant, cold, perfect. No one sees the pain beneath. As she rises to attend her court duties, no one dares to mention the faint gray tint around her eyes, or the trembling in her fingers. She is beauty itself, the embodiment of royal perfection, and she is slowly dying. By the time science caught up with fashion, it was too late for many. Venetian cerus and other lead-based cosmetics were banned in the 19th century, but the damage lingered in stories and portraits. Those ghostly white faces painted by court artists, flawless, serene, immortal, hide the cruel truth of what those women endured. The story of toxic beauty is a reminder that even in the most glamorous worlds, pain often hides beneath the surface. The queens and noblewomen who ruled empires were, in the end, victims of their own image, prisoners of a standard that demanded purity at any cost. Their white faces may have symbolized beauty and power, but beneath that mask was a slow death, one they accepted in silence, all for the sake of being seen as perfect. Throughout history, royalty has been portrayed as the epitome of elegance and grace, figures so refined that every detail of their lives seemed untouched by the unpleasant realities of ordinary existence. But behind the glittering crowns and shimmering gowns, royal women struggled with something deeply human: bad breath and decaying teeth. While they dined on the finest foods and sipped rare wines from golden goblets, their hygiene habits were shockingly poor by modern standards. Tooth decay, rotting gums, and foul breath were so common among royal courts that even the most beautiful queens often avoided smiling. Their jewels sparkled brighter than their teeth, and their secret was one they tried desperately to hide. In the medieval and Renaissance eras, dental hygiene was barely understood. Toothbrushes as we know them today did not exist. Instead, people, even royals, cleaned their teeth using cloths dipped in wine, vinegar, or crushed herbs. Some chewed sticks made from aromatic woods, but these did little to actually clean the mouth. The concept of bacteria or plaque was unknown. So much of what they did for oral care was based on superstition or cosmetics rather than real cleanliness. Royal women were no exception. In fact, their diets and habits made things worse. The diets of royal families were rich in sugar, honey, and wine, luxuries that peasants could rarely afford but that were constantly available in the royal courts. Sugar, which came to Europe in the Middle Ages, was so prized that it was used in nearly everything, from desserts to medicines. Queen Elizabeth I of England, for example, was famous for her love of sweets. She consumed candied fruits, sugar-coated almonds, and syrupy drinks daily. But this indulgence came at a terrible cost. By her later years, her teeth had blackened and decayed so severely that she could barely chew. Courtiers described her as covering her mouth when she spoke and avoiding wide smiles in public. Yet even with the stench of decay, she continued eating sugary treats, a habit she couldn't give up, even as it destroyed her royal smile. The irony was striking. While sugar was a symbol of status and wealth, it was also a silent killer of teeth. The poor, who could not afford such luxuries, often had healthier mouths. The royals, on the other hand, suffered from infections, abscesses, and chronic pain. But because dentistry was primitive, treatment options were brutal. Tooth extractions were done without anesthesia, using pliers or metal hooks. Many royal women preferred to endure their toothaches in silence rather than face such agony. Instead, they masked the pain and odor with perfumes, mouth rinses, and herbal mixtures, temporary fixes that only made things worse. Queen Catherine de' Medici of France, one of Europe's most influential queens, was said to have a powerful breath due to infected gums. In an era when women were expected to be alluring and perfect, such a condition was a source of deep embarrassment. She reportedly chewed cloves and aniseeds before meeting courtiers to mask the smell. Others, like Marie Antoinette, rinsed their mouths with rosewater or vinegar mixed with mint leaves. While these made their breath briefly fragrant, the acids in these mixtures eroded their enamel further, worsening their dental decay. In the 17th and 18th centuries, cosmetic dentistry began to appear, but it was horrifying by today's standards. Some wealthy women tried to replace missing teeth with ivory or even human teeth purchased from the poor. These replacements were wired into the mouth, often causing infections or rotting faster than the originals. The dentists of the time, known as tooth drawers, were more like butchers than medical professionals. Their tools were crude, their methods unsanitary, and their understanding minimal. Yet royal women had no choice but to rely on them when their smiles, the symbol of beauty and charm, began to crumble. In portraits, painters often flattered their subjects, omitting the details of decay. They painted smooth skin, bright eyes, and delicate smiles, hiding the reality that the queen's mouth might be filled with pain and rot. It was considered improper, even scandalous, to acknowledge such flaws. The royal mask had to be maintained at all costs. Behind closed doors, however, things were different. Servants and attendants knew the truth. They smelled it, heard the groans of their mistresses in pain, and sometimes helped them apply clove oil or herbal pastes to numb their gums. Perhaps the most infamous royal sufferer of dental decay was Queen Elizabeth. The first reports from her. Contemporaries describe her teeth as black and foul. Her love for sugar was so extreme that even foreign ambassadors remarked on her breath. Yet no one dared to mention it in her presence. Her courtiers continued to flatter her, praising her elegance and grace. It was a strange paradox, the most powerful woman in the world, yet unable to escape one of humanity's most basic afflictions. The problem of dental hygiene wasn't limited to England. Across Europe, similar patterns emerged. In France, Spain, and Austria, royal women faced the same issues. Tooth powders made from crushed eggshells, charcoal, or pumice were popular, but these were abrasive and often damaged enamel. Some even used ground coral or burnt bread to polish their teeth, methods that caused more harm than good. Add to this the constant drinking of wine and consumption of acidic foods, and the result was inevitable: blackened teeth, swollen gums, and chronic halitosis. Even in the 18th century, when hygiene practices began improving slightly, toothpaste as we know, it still didn't exist. Tooth powders were mixed at home, often containing bizarre ingredients like urine or honey. The ammonia in urine was thought to whiten teeth, and yes, some royal women actually used it. Others rubbed their gums with crushed pearls or silver dust, believing these luxurious substances could preserve their beauty. The irony is painful. The more they tried to maintain a flawless image, the more their so-called beauty rituals destroyed their health. By the 19th century, with the rise of scientific dentistry, the truth began to surface. The link between sugar, decay, and hygiene became clearer, but by then, many royal families had suffered generations of poor oral health. Some portraits of aging queens show them with closed mouths and sunken cheeks, not because of artistic modesty, but because they had lost many of their teeth. Dentures made from ivory or animal bone were introduced, but they were uncomfortable and foul-smelling. They often slipped during meals or speeches, making royal banquets a nightmare for those wearing them. The tragedy of royal dental hygiene lies in the contradiction it represents. These women had access to the best luxuries, yet lacked the simplest understanding of health. They were bathed in perfume and dressed in silk, yet inside their mouths festered rot and disease. Their smiles, symbols of charm, grace, and seduction, were carefully hidden behind fans, veils, and modest gestures. Even love letters from royal men often avoided references to kisses, for everyone knew that royal breath was anything but sweet. Today, when we see portraits of these queens, serene, flawless, and regal, it's easy to forget the suffering that lay behind the image. The blackened teeth, the constant pain, the desperate attempts to mask bad breath with cloves and roses, these were the unspoken realities of royal life. Their elegance was a performance. one that required hiding not only emotions and scandals, but also the decay of their own bodies. In the end, the story of bad breath and rotten teeth among royal women isn't just about hygiene, it is about illusion. It reminds us that power and privilege cannot protect anyone from the consequences of neglect and ignorance. Beneath the crowns and powdered wigs, they were human, flawed, suffering, and desperately clinging to an image of perfection. Their smiles, though rarely seen, carried the silent truth that beauty, without health, is only a mask, and no amount of perfume or powder could hide the stench of decay behind royal lips.